Amazing. So, hi everybody. Gorgeous to see you. So we're here today to talk all about hiring and finding amazing associates for your team. So, I'm Kathy. You may have seen me around, and I'm joined by the lovely Holly and Caroline. So between us, we each run fairly sizable agencies, and we're all good mates, and we get together and chat about life, the universe, and everything. And when I was thinking a couple of weeks ago about all things associate, I had the idea to do a webinar for wannabe associates. So people who wanted to be an associate, how to get good gigs, how to fill in application forms properly, that kind of stuff. And I mentioned it to these guys. They went, that sounds amazing. But we got on a call and accidentally ended up somehow instead saying, well, actually, it'd be really useful, wouldn't it, for people who are lead VAs or thinking about being lead VAs to have some information about how that works. So we're still going to do the other one. We're going to do that in January. But for now, we thought it would be helpful for folk to talk about finding and hiring amazing VA associates. So that's why we're here, effectively. And Holly runs the Visionary VA Circle. If you're not a member, we will bung the link in the chat. And she kindly agreed to kind of do the background sign up, hosting malarkey, to save me doing it, really. So that's why it's got the lovely Viva branding. And essentially, all three of us are really happy to share. We've got some questions to start with, and then we'll look at the chat. So we'll get through as many as we can, and we're all pretty open. We're very happy to talk without naming names, obviously. But we do need to be a bit careful because running a team is obviously a huge topic, and we'd be here all night if we veered out of our very narrow niche for today. So there may be some questions in the chat that we studiously ignore, and it's not because they're not great questions, it's that we just need to keep a little bit on topic of today's brief, which is about finding and hiring amazing associates. Doesn't mean we won't ever answer them. Stick it in the Viva chat, and we might do another webinar. Who knows?
Absolutely.
We might do another webinar. So if you know people who are thinking about setting up as a VA or potentially looking for associate work, we've agreed today that the original plan for the webinar is going to be the 16th of January. So when those details come out, again, we'll stick it through Viva, possibly. Different audience, we may not, but when we release the details of sign up for that, please do share it in your networks and with your associate teams. So hopefully that will be helpful. So we've got a poll. If Helen, you could share that with everybody with just a couple of questions about what are you at the moment, and what, if any, have been your hiring challenges to date. Also, feel free to stick your LinkedIn link or your Instagram link, whatever you use, in the chat. We've done the same, so we can all connect and chat afterwards. But I think, given that we don't want to waste any time, we want to answer as many questions as possible, we'll just crack on. So first of all, let's introduce ourselves. So Holly, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So hopefully most of you know me already, but I have a VA agency called Virtually Priceless, which I've now been running for 6 years. I've grown that from, like most people, being a solo VA through to having a team of around 30. I also run the Visionary VA Circle, where we're helping people, supporting people to grow their businesses and scale to their own agency models if they so wish. But yeah, please do connect with me on LinkedIn or find me on Instagram, and we'd love you to come join the group if you're not in there already. Oh, you're on mute, Kathy.
Yeah, you're on.
Sorry.
Caroline, I reckon it's your turn.
Caroline, it was indeed your turn.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Caroline. I run a virtual assistant agency called Upsource. We are around a team of 30 now, and yeah, we've been going for 4 years. I started it in COVID, like Holly as well. I did the doing and then stepped away when I had my second baby. So launched it while I was pregnant, and used the maternity leave to go into an agency model. I also had previous experience as an employed VA where I worked for an agency. So I sometimes can bring some of that experience as well into this, which is quite interesting. And I've also got a podcast called Bump to Business Owner from my experience, if you hadn't realised, from parenthood and business owning, bringing that all into one place. So also check that out if that's something that would interest you.
Amazing. And I'm Kathy. I run an agency called Personally Virtual. We've been going 10 years this year, amazingly, which explains why I was brunette and I'm now grey. So as well as running the agency, which is I think we're around 30 at the moment. I've also written 2 books, one which was a kind of funny / slightly sweary book about what it's like going from being a PA to being a VA, which is virtually painless. And then last year I wrote How to Work with a Virtual Assistant, Outsource Everything But Your Brilliance, which is aimed more at prospects and clients who might be wondering how this whole VA malarkey thing works. So yeah, that's me. So first up, we thought we'd try and do this in a logical order. So biggest question, when do you start to build your team? So do you wait for the client work and then find somebody? Or do you have people poised and ready, but potentially have them sitting there with nothing to do? Obviously, it's a bit chicken and egg. So let's go around the room. Caroline.
Because of how I started, just to share my personal experience, I had some clients already. I knew I was going to hand over, but because I knew I was taking maternity leave, I just spoke to as many associates as possible, thought who was out there, who might like to work with the clients, who do I think I'd like to work with as well. So I think that is a great place to start, is obviously checking out, you've got to make sure your comms shows that you're ready for clients. So you are a we, not a me on the website. But I would also, I think you're only as good as knowing what kind of people you want to work with, and that's on your team. And I would really start with just, if you know your client base and what sort of clients you want to attract, then you should be able to start talking to associates, and because it will be in line with the client base that you're attracting. So even if you haven't got a client there, you should be knowing at this stage of your business what sort of clients, hours roughly you'd be bringing in, and then speaking to the associates out there and kind of getting a gauge of who's out there and who you'd like to work with as a business and who your clients would like to work with, obviously.
Fab. Holly?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely changed for me. I'm fortunate to be in the position now where I do have a bench of candidates, and we do try to constantly talk to people and screen people to see who might be a good fit. But definitely at the start for me, it was a bit of a scramble, and it was a case of finding people as the roles came in. Because of the rate at which we grew, I kind of just couldn't keep up, and something would come in and I'd put a post out in a Facebook group and then wait for the applications to come in, and it was yeah, a bit of a frantic process sometimes because it'd be a quick turnaround. But definitely now we've got to a place where we do try to keep that regular pipeline of people coming through, and obviously building up a VA network and having a bit more of a profile that people approach me as well makes a massive difference. It took quite a long time to get to that point, but it's a really great place to be.
Yeah, and for me, similar. I definitely have had moments of absolute horror where I've not had anybody and had to go out and advertise, and that is not ideal for me. But sometimes you get a role that just doesn't quite fit with people. But generally, I have what I call a virtual bench, and when I talk to potential associates, I will be quite open with them and say, I haven't got anything specific at the moment, but if you're happy to have a chat with me, I'll keep your details on file. And most people are pretty happy with that. And I think the longest I had somebody on my bench without using them was 5 years. And then finally, after, she'd email me going, I've got capacity. And I'd be like, yeah, I haven't got anything. And I would message her going, I've got perfect things. She'd be like, yeah, I'm full. 5 years it took before we finally worked together. But we did finally work together. So yeah, it can be a long burn, but having some people that I know are sort of poised and ready is really important to me.
Definitely. And I think the other thing to mention is that we actually also support each other. Like, yeah, we've definitely had conversations with Kathy where we'll go, help, I need someone. Do you know anyone? I've got this role. So as well as, potentially advertising, actually, we're also then kind of sharing our own sort of network contacts and things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's move on to where we find these lovely people. So I don't mind going first this time. So I would say that a massive number of my team have come through networking rather than advertising. So I do quite a lot of in-person advertising with both VAs and PAs, on the basis that most PAs will eventually get sick of corporate life and, will quit, and then, might come my way, because they're the type of people that we usually work with. But, online groups as well, introductions from other VAs, oh, so and so is setting up as a VA, do you want to chat? And because I wrote my first book, which is very much about the early stages of being a VA, I sometimes talk to people quite early on in their career when they're not quite ready, but down the line they might come to me. I can't remember the last time I put an advert out. I have done it, but I don't find it particularly successful, I have to say. As time has gone on, it's got less and less successful for me. Caroline, how about you?
No, that's interesting. I actually can't remember the last time I put an advert out, and you're not saying I won't again. And as we were talking about the mad scramble, that does still happen sometimes. You get a client through and you're like, nope, there's just not anyone on the bench who suits this. Who can I find? But it's a lot, I think, definitely starting out, it really helped being a part of different Facebook communities. And also asking people like coaches privately if anyone knew anyone, that was helpful. But it's still a lot of VAs I've worked with who are on the Upsource team I've worked with before in previous roles, previous companies, and they've referred people in as well. So it's been a mix. I have had definitely great success on Facebook groups, and we have, I think I know Holly and Kathy are the same, but I have a form live on the website all the time, so that's always good because you just never know who's going to find your website and apply when you're not looking, and then suddenly you are looking. So I think I spend as much time nurturing that pipeline and making sure I'm out there looking for people more than I am for clients, because that's more, the key thing. What's the point in all these clients if I don't have the people to fill it?
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, absolutely, it is one of my, almost on balance with business development, finding the right team is kind of up there in my goals and my targets for my life. Holly, anything to add?
It's definitely a big challenge, isn't it? And I think I went through a period where we had a really, very fast period of growth. I actually ended up going down the employee route because I was really struggling to find good associates. I've got some amazing ones, but we definitely went through a phase where we put an advert out and it would just be tumbleweeds, or the people applying just did not fit the spec I was putting out, and I needed to find people much quicker. So we actually went down the employee route as well. And I've now got a mixture of employees and associates on my team, particularly where I had roles that were slightly bigger hours to fill that a lot of associates don't have capacity for. But like Caroline, the other thing I've had quite a bit of a success with is around referrals from within the team as well. We offer our own associate team and employee team a referral bonus. So if they introduce someone to us and they've been working then successfully with us for 3 months, we then pay them a bonus. I think it's £150 for recommending someone to us. And that has been great for bringing in new people that are transitioning from the corporate world into VA life. I know some lead VAs don't like to work with people that are new into VAing. I actually love it because if they're great, you nab them first and you train them and, mold them to how you want them to work. So I think it can work very successfully, but you have to be prepared to put a bit more time and effort into some hand holding and making sure that they kind of learn the ropes in the right way.
Amazing.
But yeah, absolutely, the networking aspect, and as I say, to get to a point now, I think where we're all a bit bigger, our teams are bigger, we're a bit more known within the industry. Like you say, we've got those VA trainers that also know us and know our businesses, and we're in a position where people are being referred to us and kind of naturally applying on the website or dropping a LinkedIn message and coming through that way. But it's taken a while to get to that point. That didn't happen in the first couple of years.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And sticking with you, Holly, what is your sort of start to finish application process, would you say?
Oh God, you want me to summarize this into a couple of minutes, right?
It saves me and Caroline doing it because I imagine it's relatively similar.
Yeah, so as Caroline mentioned, we do now always have a form live on the websites, which is just a simple ClickUp form, used to be a Google form, and we just ask for some basic details, a bit of history from people, and then we also have a few kind of sample questions that I just want to get a feel for people's personality as well as their skills and experience. If that comes through and they're a good fit for us, I actually now have someone on the team, the lovely Julie, who's somewhere here on the call, but she now also helps with my recruitment, and she will do that kind of initial screening and meet with people and just have a chat to see if they're a good fit. And then it really depends whether they've come to us for a specific role and we need to move quickly, or whether it's someone potentially moving on to that bench that you mentioned, Kathy, as well. We do use a trial task in our process as well. That's something that I introduced fairly early on, I think, because I did have a few bad experiences where I would have people who could talk the talk and then they'd get a role and they couldn't walk the walk. And that for me was really important, just to get a sense of whether they could actually do the things that they told me they could do at the speed they could do them, with enough professionalism that they could use the correct spelling and grammar and that sort of thing. So I now do that as a paid task. I didn't do that initially, but I've made it that now. And I will pay people for an hour for coming on and doing that for me, because I appreciate the giving up time. But for me, it's an investment in my business to make sure I'm getting people of the right caliber. And then if they pass that kind of virtual task and it benchmarks against the rest of the team, we'll then decide if we want to put them onto our bench or whether we've got a live role that we want to put them forward for. And then once we've got a role ready for them, I will then have a chat and potentially ask them some more questions. And how we then run it with the client, it's really bespoke depending on the client role. Sometimes I will meet them and we'll be able to put them straight forward to the client. Sometimes the client will want to have a bit of a say, or we might have to put a couple of people forward. So it really does depend. But yeah, I said the process changes slightly. The other thing we do that's really useful is that we record all those interviews as well, obviously making sure we're letting the associate know, because as you mentioned, Kathy, it can be years before you actually have a role for someone. And I find it a really useful way just to go back and watch even 10 minutes of the video, just to refresh your memory and say, oh yeah, that person, had this kind of personality. I think they'd be a great fit for this person. And just a reminder to see a face rather than a list of notes, I find super helpful.
Yeah. Caroline?
Yeah, like
Similar?
Holly's, it's very similar. I haven't handed over the recruitment piece yet, but I have started bringing someone on the team, Gemma, who started to work with me. We've actually started bringing in an initial video call as well to save my time, which is interesting. And we're testing this. I think this is something to make clear, is this is something we're testing, and I'm still not on board if it'll be part of the process, but that's what you have to do as a business owner. And some people might like it. Well, I maybe lose talent, but I've also... two people have really stood out through this process, and that shows in some ways it might be working. So that's what we've started. But same with the trial task. I've always done a trial task. It's always been paid. It used to be really simple, and it was more just to see how they'd react to feedback, because that's a huge thing of the culture of Upsource is feedback, because I've worked with a lot of assistants who can't handle feedback, and I'm not even giving harsh feedback because it's so simple. No one could have got the task wrong, but sometimes it was just like, oh, what, you're giving me feedback? And in which case then they're not right for Upsource if that's the case. So that was kind of a bit of a cheeky little test on my side, but I have actually redone the whole test because I can see someone's asked about trial tasks, and it's quite heavy and quite intense, but I've found it quite good actually for weaning people out, and I think I needed that, and I do cater it towards the role. But yeah, like I said, I caught someone out earlier this year saying they could do Notion, they could do all this stuff, and that's what the test had in, and they couldn't. So it was quite good. So it's not for the faint-hearted now, and so I'm constantly tweaking it. And I think for me, 2025, complete transparency, is going to be a year I keep going with that recruitment process and trying and tweaking. But initially, on paper, it's kind of similar to Holly's, how we do things with the form, the interview, and that. And I'm just tweaking things along the way with the trial and trying out video.
Oh, that's really interesting. Mine is probably very similar. There is always that slight challenge, and I love the idea of recording interviews because I have a really bad memory for faces. So when I look at somebody, it doesn't matter how good my notes are, I will not remember who they are. And I will tell people when I speak to them, I said, email me, remind me of your existence, because I have the memory of a fruit fly. And I'm fine with that. I don't mind people emailing me going, hello, I'm still here. Hello, I've got this many hours left, or whatever. I always love that and encourage it, because it means that when the moment comes, I've got, relatively current information. Otherwise, it goes out of date quite quickly. So I don't think there's anything else for me. to add
Do you want me
to
to talk
that?
about the trial task a little bit, Kathy? I've just seen there's been a couple of questions around that.
Yeah.
So someone's asked in the chat about what sort of trial tasks that we do. So my business, primarily ours, is exec EA support. We're working for corporate clients. It's fast-paced EA roles, which people often think is quite difficult to test. So my test is actually very general, but I'm just checking some of those core skills about prioritization, communication, the ability to do a research task really quickly, to present information in a way that's appropriate for the client. So don't overthink it. Don't make it, super complicated. If the prioritization one, for example, I just give a list of, I think it's 12 things that might be in your inbox when you log on in the morning, and they're potentially from different clients where you've checked 3 inboxes and you've got all these different things. How do you prioritize, in what order you attack them? And it's just something simple like that. You just want to see how their mind works and that they've got the right idea. And then it might be researching something for a client. We do one around, I think, that you've been asked to research an event, and can you put together some ideas for the senior leadership team? So again, it's about the ability to go off and research that quickly, have a list of questions that you can ask back again, and to be able to summarize that in a really brief kind of bullet point way that they can then present to their meeting. So just think of the everyday stuff that you need people to do, or the things that you kind of have issues with if you have had people or have had challenges, and just test those basic things. I give people a chunk of text and say, can you put this into a draft newsletter format? And I litter it with typos that I'm expecting people to find. Like, we're just really simple things. And make sure you have someone complete it, or that you complete it yourself, that is going to be fast and accurate, so that you've got a benchmark and that it is doable within that time. And then you've got a good base assessment to be able to compare it to.
Yeah, that's really good. And the other thing is to really use your application form, I think. So anyone who has ever put out an application form will know that some of the responses are, honestly, you could write a book on how bad they are. Hence the associate webinar. I had one woman who I had to reject, and she spelt her own email address wrong, so I couldn't even reject her.
I've had several people do that, where you get a bounce back.
Seriously.
It does not bode well.
Yeah. But I find making the questions pertinent to the culture and the type of, so I don't just say, I can't remember what my question is, something about I'd like to clone myself, but like slightly thinner and less grouchy. Tell me how you'd be a great fit for my team. And that, to me, encourages people to show a bit of their personality, possibly use a bit of humor, because that's important to me. I don't want a bunch of corporate clones all turning up, sitting in Slack, being all behaved. I quite like a bit of chaos. So for me, having those kind of questions, which gives people a bit of leeway to show their personality, is important. Like Holly, we're very much diary, traditional EA types. So I would always, rather than get them to fill in, because it's not a job, it's a freelance piece of work. So I would just say, give me your LinkedIn details. On occasion, people don't do LinkedIn, which is weird, but some people don't. And in which case I'll say, fine, send me something else, send me a CV. Your LinkedIn's got like 3 things in it in the last decade. You're either, not very, but I wouldn't just go, oh, well, that's terrible, I'm not going to bother. It's like, give me a website, give me a CV. If those things stand up, great. So there's other ways through the process of checking, I suppose, as well as just the test, you all the way through you're assessing, which sort of leads us on to the how, which is the last bit that we've kind of got in advance from questions, and then we're going to move on to the chat. So trust is a massive issue, right? We're giving these people access to our clients, we're trusting them to do a good job, and it's always relatively terrifying. Doesn't matter how many tasks you put them through, how many interviews. So obviously there are things we do to mitigate the risk of this going horribly wrong. And there are red flags we would look out for, much like, spelling your own email address wrong. And we've all been, I have applied for a job in my early days as a VA. There was a job that could have been written for me, and I got so excited, I just gabbled a pile of crap to this poor woman. And after looking back on it, I was just like, oh my God, she must have thought I was a lunatic. But I was so excited to see this job that was like literally had my name written all over it. Anyway, it didn't, apparently. So let's have a think about what we do to mitigate risk when we're bringing associates on board. Caroline, do you want to go first?
Onboarding. Your onboarding has to be as excellent as it is for your clients, and you need to have clear expectations, and you can't expect them to know how to work as a VA. Like I said, you know, I'm in similar ilk of Holly. I don't mind if people aren't set up yet, as long as they get their ICO and insurance registered on day one. But I've literally walked people through that because I can tell they've got potential. But I think if you give them mitigate all the risk for it to be your fault if something, we talk about trust, Cathy, in the sense of if something's going to go wrong with having an associate and the client. Yeah, I do everything I can to mitigate that. If something goes wrong, I did everything I could, basically, or Upsource did everything we could to set up that VA for success. And that's what you should always be coming from a perspective of. I'm kind of from that perspective of a business owner where we are here to support them, help them. And, you know, if it's not been right, you know, there's always a chance it could be the client. That does happen, that the client shows their true colors that were completely different from the sales call. That has happened. Or sometimes it can be something to do, a lot of the time it's nothing to do with you and it's something going on in the VA's personal life that has just made it all come down to something. But I come from the ilk as well, if we're talking about trust, from a sense of trusting they're going to represent your brand, be a part of you, and not, you know, go direct with the client as well. I'm a huge believer in karma. You know, if that's going to happen, then they're not right for Upsource. I had to learn my lesson, move on from that, and they'll learn their lesson too when it comes back. So that's I've not had that as an issue, really, I don't think, unless I've not known about it. But I am just really strict on our onboarding process, and we've received a lot of compliments for it. And I'm setting expectations for the team and how we are as a culture and as a business and how we work with clients. And I'm really on it with check-ins at the beginning until we've built the trust as well, because that's something to be built between you and associate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and thinking about that, actually thinking about when it goes wrong, have we done everything? I wrote a blog once, years ago, about the new client horrors, which is actually the thing that has scuppered more new associates than anything else. And this is slightly off topic, but I'll share the link. But when an associate starts and they're perfect and they're amazing and they absolutely are competent to do the job, and then all of a sudden it horribly goes to shit and you cannot fathom why for the life of you, very often it's because there's something going on in their life at home. They're moving house, they're getting a divorce, their kids are in trouble at school, something's going on, and that addition of a new client with new systems, new diaries to learn, new stuff is too much, and it's all gone horribly wrong. And every time when you dig into that, it's like, oh yeah, and by the way, I'm having my kitchen extended and I'm living in a building site and it's a bloody nightmare. And you go, okay, interesting. Are you sure you want to get rid of this client, or is it just there's a lot going on? But it's definitely one as a lead VA to be aware of. I don't ever let people take on more than one new client at a time, ever, because that new clientness is really hard for everybody. It's like being a temp, isn't it? Taking on a new client. It's anxious inducing for everybody, and for a new associate, no different. But overloading somebody with 2 new clients at the same time is a lot. And you're not necessarily going to know what's going on in their life. They may have another client somewhere who's being an absolute dick, right? It's making their life a living hell. You're not going to know that, and they may not know you well enough to open up about their personal life, and it's none of your business. But if things start going wrong in those early days, that might be why. I'll share the blog, I'll dig it out. But yeah, in terms of trust, I think sometimes you just have to suck it up and do it and go with your gut. There are, obviously, you get references, you check ICO, you check insurance, you make sure people have got the right IT set up, that they're a grown up. I'm not like you guys. I can't bear new VAs. I can't. Poor Helen has to do new associate coddling for me, because if I have anybody ask me how to send an invoice again, I swear to God, I'll hurl myself off a bridge. I just
I had someone to do that as well, because I
can't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't do it myself. I'm just like, we are supportive of that.
I
So
think
I
that's
have
being
had a few, and some have been brilliant, but I've had some that have just been incredibly hard work, and it is like spoon feeding, and I would prefer not to if I can avoid it. I would do it if I had to, but it's not my preferred method. Whereas I know you guys would actually prefer it because you can induct them into the ways. I'm like,
Like, yeah, just
have your own ways.
Let
Just
their
don't
let
hours.
ask,
them keep them all to ourselves.
just don't ask me stupid questions. I can't deal with it. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no
So
question too stupid, Kathy. That's what we say on our team.
Absolutely.
I might say that out loud. It's probably not what I'm thinking in my head. Holly, anything else on sort of trust and mitigating risk?
Yeah, so I think on the mitigating piece, like another thing that's really important for me is to try to understand what people want from the role. Why are they becoming a VA? Do they just want to earn some money? They want to turn up, do the role and go away. Do they want to learn how to run a team? Are they in the throes of growing their own business? What do they want from us and how can we help support it? Because I totally appreciate that not everybody on my team is in the same position. We've had some people with us for years who are very happy for me just to pass them the work. They turn up and do it. And we've got other people who I absolutely know are going to go off and run their own empire at some time. And I'm absolutely fine with either option. I would prefer to know about it and have an idea of the timeline. I do ask people to commit to a minimum of 6 months, and it's incredibly upsetting if that doesn't happen, because our clients all tend to be retainer contracts that are ongoing. So I want them to have a good experience. So it's incredibly frustrating when that doesn't happen. And I think, yeah, like you mentioned, Kathy, about references and stuff where possible, definitely if they're within the VA network already, we can absolutely potentially ask each other for a little bit of feedback as well. You know, quite often we end up with associates who are on both of our teams, which is quite interesting. Generally, it turns out to be a positive thing and we kind of love them, but there have been occasions where it's not actually always the right fit. And then I think, as Caroline mentioned, that sort of hand-holding and those regular check-ins to start with, and just to make sure with the client and with the VA that everything is going smoothly and that you are kept aware of anything that might be an issue, because it's when they don't share and don't keep you informed that these problems just suddenly escalate, and then it's not recoverable, which is incredibly frustrating.
And do we have any pet hate / red flags during the application process that we wish to share? I know I've already been told about one of mine earlier.
Several, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
I can normally sniff out the truth where someone says they are not working and they are working. I normally can sniff that out. And it's a real pet hate of mine, because I'm happy to talk to people if they're working, if there's a plan. Because like I said, you never know. Like I said, it's Kathy said earlier, it's been 2 years I've had someone on the bench and they've become an associate. So it's all about the long term. If I think they're a right fit, I'll chat with them. But if they're lying to me about working, I mean, no, I'm not going to work with you because you've already lied to me. So that is a huge red flag for me, is making sure. And I have had one of my worst experiences was someone who wasn't honest about that. So I think that's why I sniffed out now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that trust piece, isn't it? I think we've all been badly burned by something at some point.
Yeah.
We've got someone, I've seen them doing the rounds in groups at the moment looking for associate roles, who we have blacklisted because they tried to steal one of our clients before we even took them on, which I think is quite amusing. And like Caroline said about Karma, I think it's hilarious that she's now looking for roles and, you know, can't get anything.
Oh, yes,
But there's situations like that happen, which are incredibly frustrating, but you just have to live and learn, and you are going to experience some of these tricky situations. It's just how you deal with them and how you move on from it. I think the biggest thing that I've learned is to act quickly on it. I think if you've got issues with someone and it's not going right, you have to appreciate sometimes it's just not recoverable, and actually sometimes you just need to switch someone out. And even though that might be a painful experience for you and for the client, if it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do, and you just have to suck it up. And actually your handling of that situation and managing it on behalf of the client and not leaving them with the problem speaks volumes about the kind of person that you are, the kind of team that you run, the way that you run your business. And the client isn't having to deal with it, right? You're taking the problem away from them. You're showing them that you've got the leadership and that you understand their needs, and that you're looking after their best interests. So yeah, having to take that tough decision sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I suppose for me, washing hanging in the background was the one that people talk about, because I have got washing hanging in my background, which is why it is blurred, because we now have the technology to deal with that. But when I say washing, I'm thinking underwear quite specifically. It's like, are you going to turn and also having branded stuff in the background, right? If you're an associate and you've got, you know, Bob's VA service in the background and you're going to get on a client call with that, I'm like, no. No. And my favorite, not so much since COVID, thank God, Jenny's mummy Zoom.
Oh, yeah. It's just demonstrating a level of professionalism, isn't it? I want all the communications to be professional, from you dropping me an email or a LinkedIn message to your Zoom setup to the way you interact with my team, because it's not always me that's talking to you. All of that stuff paints a picture. I ask people on my on the application form to share the social media profile, the LinkedIn or website or whatever, and I will go and check those out.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I want to make sure someone's not having a rant about something political or bad mouthing something. I don't, I want to check the way they portray themselves. We are dealing with incredibly, professional corporate clients. It's, it's not my thing to talk about being a mumpreneur and talking about my kids all the time. And I want people who are going to represent my business in the right way. And like, Kathy and Caroline both said already, it's thinking about what your business stands for, who your clients are, what your values are, the culture of your business, and making sure you're finding team members that are aligned with that. So important.
Yeah.
On the
Yeah,
Zoom name,
exactly.
Kathy, I had to say bigger red flag for me as if they've got a client's name on
Oh.
there.
Oh, that drives me mad.
Hugest red flag, because that's showing not in lack of awareness on tech and also confidentiality. So
Yeah.
I would rather they had Dottie's mum. I don't know if that's my cat's name, by the way. But
Yeah.
Dottie's mum than a client's name any day, because that's
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, that is another one that gets me. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, Davi's just put in the chat, red flag, a candidate coming on Zoom in a sloppy t-shirt, drinking a coffee like they were hanging out with a friend. Yeah, it's yeah, I don't mind people drinking a coffee, and I don't even mind if people are scruffy, but there's definitely something about being ready to have a professional conversation, isn't there?
Yeah.
About
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Right, so let's have a little dig. One of the questions we were asked, which I don't think we've covered so far, is not exactly off topic. So at what point, and I know, Holly, you said that it depends on the client, and I suspect we're all the same. At what point does your candidate meet your client, and when and how does that all play out? So Holly, we know yours varies client on client. Caroline, do you have a set process, or does
It does vary. I do tend to put a few candidates in front of them, even if I know who I would go with. And a lot of the time they do, the client wants my opinion. But I think sometimes it's good for them to see. And sometimes I can be wrong, apparently. Because it is about personality fit, and it is an absolute joy when you can just tell. And then they have a benchmark. It'll be both candidates I've put forward for, I think, can do the role excellently. But when you see the chemistry between two, and then they can feel that versus someone else, that's when you know you've
Yeah.
got
And do
onto
you join
something.
those calls, or
I
again,
join the
does it
calls,
depend?
yes. It might be, if it's a case of someone who's been on the team for a long time, I might not do, or if I'm switching a VA out because a VA's moving on, going on maternity leave, something like that, I might not join. But I do tend to join, but I make it very clear why I'm there. I'm on mute. I'm there for any upsource questions, because I just don't like, especially for new associates, for them to be put on the spot and not know how to answer. So I sometimes I might interject as well, because I do actually just know from the years of experience, if you are working with VAs who haven't been through all the tech issues, tech hacks you can have, I know I can just jump in and be like, actually, we can do this kind of thing. And I just think that helps towards the service and helps show why they're coming with us as a brand, not just the associate. So we do keep that just up until the first onboarding call, and then after that it's their time to fly together.
Do you join them, Holly?
Again, it depends, to be honest. So we've got a couple of bigger clients where the roles are a little bit more transactional, and they do still have a relationship with the VA, but it is a little bit more like they just need someone to get shit done, and it's not necessarily a huge amount of hours. And we've got others where it's much more personalized, and it's really important that they've got the right fit. They might be a bit more of a startup, or someone that's not worked with the VA support before, or any EA support before. So it really does depend on the role for us. Quite often, if it's a current client and they're expanding, and it's just, we need another person, we've got this person coming in, we need someone else, we need a bit of cover, we've got a project, I will just give them someone, because we've been working with them for a number of years. They've had a number of team members, and I know what they need and the type of person they need. So those roles I wouldn't. Again, like Caroline, if I've got experienced members on the team who I know are going to say the right things, act in the right way, defer the right questions, I will absolutely let them fly solo on calls. If I've got someone new that's not tried and tested, and it's a new client as well, particularly, I would certainly join, or one of my team would join, because I've got people that help with that too. But yeah, it really does depend. There's certainly no hard and fast rule for us.
Yeah,
How
and
about you?
I'm a bit the same. And some clients now, they know us well enough. They don't even meet people. They just, it's like, this is so and so. They're starting Wednesday. Away you go.
Yeah.
Others, the lead or the sort of head client, if you like, might meet them. And again, sometimes it's one. You know, if I think I know who the best fit is, or if I only have one. If I can't call it, and it's usually personality wise, if I'm like, I don't know which one's the best fit, they're both great, then I would put two, in worst case 3, in front of a client and have them do a 15-minute call. And I usually let them just go on that, which I used to join them, and I found that it was making the associates a bit on edge, and they weren't really able to show their personality, and the client kept looking to me for answers when actually they needed to be the ones having the quite natural chemistry conversation. So I don't tend to join them anymore. Don't think that's gone wrong yet. But the client needs to see their personality, and I find that I am a bit of a hindrance if I'm there. I quite like the whole, I'm just going to sit here on mute and not say anything unless it comes up. That might work actually as a
It's kind
plan.
of setting the standard for the call that I'm not a part of this. That's where
be
I get
really clear.
That side. So yeah, and also I've just to say, like, got to a point, I do have someone on the team. If I'm on holiday and something, I've got someone now who can join them on instead of which is helpful for business continuity as a lead VA, so you can take that time off.
We've got a couple of questions in the chat. So one is, I've been looking for an experienced PA for months. I vetted hundreds of CVs and done tens of interviews and can't seem to find the right fit for my client. How can I get someone very specific for a picky client? I might go first on that, because I have had in the past some quite challenging clients. I think there's various ways to do this. The first one is, are you throwing enough money at the problem? Well, firstly, do you want to work with a client who's a pain in the arse? That would be question number one. If it's one person and it's sod all hours, is it worth your time and effort if they're a pain in the arse? Probably not. Where we've come
my
across
biggest client presently, and they're taking another VA, another PA. So it is worth it money-wise, but they're very, very picky.
Yeah, and I suppose the next question, and we're the same, right? So one of our biggest teams is a team of 12 VAs, and 12 or 13, and there are different characters within those, and sometimes I have to hire knowing that somebody's quite a tricky character. So throw money at it. If you're hiring for somebody and you're telling people this is a tricky character, are you making it worth their while? People are, if they've got a choice of a role that's going to be nice and easy with nice people who are friendly and lovely and not going to drive them mental, are going to pick that over the tricky one, unless the money's right, I guess.
So you're saying pay the PA, offer more to the PAs, but I'm not getting to the point of how much they're going to get paid. I'm not even getting really good clients. Sorry, no voice. I'm not getting really good candidates.
Okay. And how are you looking for them? Application forms?
I have like 5 different online places.
Yeah.
And are these for associates, or is this for an employed role?
It's for an associate, and to be a PA, and the person they're going to be a PA for is very picky and wants very specific tech knowledge and hours that they're available and things like that. And then personality.
Are they being realistic about that for a VA, or do they actually need an employed PA? Like, is it possible to find what they're looking for, or is it really a needle in a haystack? And I guess how realistic is the client being about their expectations?
So if I feel like they're not being totally realistic, in other words, I feel like they could take somebody who doesn't check all the boxes, but could be trained because they have the ability to be trained. How do I get that through the client's head? Because we've mentioned it a few times, but we haven't pushed that really hard.
I mean, I guess does the client want is the client prepared to compromise and go down that route, or do they want to wait for the right person? Because presumably in the meantime, they're sitting there without the help. So can they continue to go forward like that? Have you got someone that's a close, good fit that you could put in there while you're still looking and you could test the water with a little bit? You know, so it's the client that perhaps, you know, you trial the trial basis for a month, 3 months, whatever, and see if it works.
Right. I suggested that, but I'll suggest it again.
Yeah. And in what way are they being like, yeah, I mean, are they a tricky character to work for? Are you having to share that with the person that you're trying to recruit when you're sort of getting to the interview stage? Are they a difficult character?
I don't know. I haven't worked with this particular person. This
Okay.
is somebody who works in the company that we're already working with, but this particular person I didn't work with.
Okay. I mean, I do find it's sometimes useful to get a download from someone else on the team. So if there is a tricky director to support, for example, you usually find someone that will give you the lowdown on actually what they really like and the kind of person they need. And I think that understanding, you know, the type of personalities that you're recruiting for, like I'm very clear with our associates that I expect them to manage upwards. We manage our clients. We are not there to tick admin tasks off the list. We're there to boss them about. We're there to call them out on stuff. We're there to hold them accountable. And I want people on my team who are strong enough and confident enough to take that kind of stance with the client. So yeah, I guess, are you being clear with the team members as well about the expectations from your side on that? And if it is someone that's a bit tricky to manage, what kind of personality you need them to have as well as the technical skills?
Right. Can I just add to that question? At
Yeah.
what point does this become something that they should be paying us for because we're spending so much time trying to find the right person? Or is that just off the table? You just have to suck it up and do it as long as it takes.
It's your business. It's for you to decide when that becomes too much, right? Like if this is taking you hours and hours and hours, absolutely. If they've got, you know, requirements that are that tricky to fill, or are you the right person to even fill that? Do they need to look at the employed route? Do they need to go through an agency? Like I mean, it's very hard without knowing the specifics of the role and the location and the requirements and all that sort of thing. But if it's causing you more of a headache, you do have the ability to say no. Because all the time and energy you're wasting on potentially not finding someone for this, you're missing opportunities to meet other people, pick up extra work, network with other VAs, and build your business a different way. So unless it's incredibly worth it financially, maybe think again.
Yeah. It is, because I want this company to think of us as their agency that will supply all of their people with VAs.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
But at the same time, I feel like I'm being an HR agency right now, which isn't what we're supposed to be doing.
Yes. Right, I'm going to move us along because we're getting a bit into the weeds of this, and we've got a few more questions and we've still got some bits to cover, and we've only got 8 minutes to go. So we've talked about chemistry calls. Associates on the bench, do we get them to sign contracts? I don't do anything really with them until I've actually got work for them.
I might get them to sign an NDA if they're meeting a client, and they might not go through. I don't want to go through the whole contract process. Sometimes I can just get a good feel for someone, so if it's happening quite quickly, I don't stress if that doesn't happen, but it's good to have an NDA there.
Yes. And as Davy was talking about, obviously finding the right people is tricky, particularly when your clients are demanding, which, you know, clients can be demanding. So Caroline, Holly, what things do you do to attract really good associates to your team?
We pay them well. Definitely number one thing, I think.
Throw money at it.
Throw money at it for sure. I think we try really hard to make sure that we're building a good culture and that we're building something people want to be a part of. You know, from day one of having associates, I always had an open Slack channel for everybody. I have the whole team in that group. We share team-wide updates. We have quarterly team meetings. We run training sessions. I want people to feel like they're part of something bigger and that they're kept apprised of what's going on across the business. They are always my go-to in terms of offering out new roles. If I have smaller roles that I don't want to take on, I definitely offer them to that small pool of my own associates first. I think it's just about kind of taking people under your wing and making them feel a proper part of your community, and that you're there to help them. They all know they can pick up the phone to me and ask if they've got an issue with one of their own clients that they've got a problem with. I'm absolutely there to help advise them and support them. And I love the fact they all lean on each other for help as well. They're always sharing resources in the chat channel. Can someone recommend a restaurant? Does anyone have a contact here? All that sort of thing. So it's really nice. And they've used each other for associate work in their own businesses as well, because they know they're pre-screened and vetted by me. They're all of a certain caliber. So why wouldn't they use each other in that way too?
Yeah. Caroline, anything to add?
So we've always had Slack. I am a huge fan of Notion for a knowledge base. Also with my business, because I took maternity leave, I've just always had someone there who can support as well as me, and she's a different personality to me. We obviously we've worked together for years, so we work well together, but it's also good if someone feels like they, for whatever reason, they want to go to her instead of me. I just think that's a nice option to have always had. And again, the talent pool, yes, sharing information. We've always done for a good few years now, done lunch and learns and other things. Or tomorrow, for example, we're doing a social. It's open to VAs outside of Upsource, but no one, it's not costing much anyway. But of course, it's complimentary for Upsource team members. So there's that option of meeting in person if people want to do that. I've put the team up for awards to encourage their business and their place in the VA industry. And just because they're excellent, they needed to be nominated for awards themselves and probably wouldn't have done it. I like to recognise that. And we're just there to keep building our knowledge together and see it's like a team effort of, yes, providing an excellent service to the clients, but also just helping, which Kathy and Holly are in line with, helping to raise the standards of the industry altogether.
Yeah, fab. Another question that sort of relates to that. Do you ask your associates to undertake any training or get familiar with different tech or apps if they're not currently using them to help them boost their curb appeal? And do you pay them for training?
It depends.
Yes, I was going with the hard, it depends on that.
It depends, standard answer. It depends on the training. I'm trying to think what we've done now. We tend to run some training sessions where they're invited to attend if they want to. So it might be something they're going to find useful. If they want to join, they can. If it's something specific I want them to do. So for example, we're planning a client communication session. I absolutely want everybody to do that. And if they can't join live, I expect them to watch it on catch up, and I will pay them for their time to watch it. Absolutely. So yeah, it really depends. I don't really try to get people to learn different platforms, because they're usually using the one they need for the business anyway. If they want to learn that in their own time and they've got their own business, I feel that's their responsibility. But absolutely, if we're running a session and they want to join out of interest, for sure. And we record all our training sessions, and we have a team SharePoint site, so like an intranet, I guess. And we store everything there, and people can access that anytime and watch any of the resources from previous trainings.
Yeah, and we do similar. We have lunch and learns that are just interesting and useful things that might be helpful, and people can come along if they want, and they are unpaid. And then if there is like, we refresh our cyber essentials annually, and as part of that we have to do some sort of mandatory cyber and data training. Everybody has to do that, so they are paid for their time to do that. Somebody else is talking about catch-up calls. I pay for catch-up calls with associates, the time that it takes them to do that. Because I remember when I was an associate, I had one client, I spent longer talking to the lead VA than I did doing the work, and that wasn't paid. And I used to just kind of despair, be like, I've wasted so many of my billable hours talking about this client and not actually earning any money on this client. It's just really frustrating. So yeah, I will always pay for catch-up calls. Another couple on, I'm conscious of time. Would you accept an associate who is employed 9 to 5 but wants to start VAing a couple of hours a day to build their VA career? I think Holly and I are probably both a hard no on that.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't work. If the only times I think it works if for some reason you have a social media client or someone who was more lifestyle-y.
Project work, yeah.
It just doesn't work, because and they're not as invested in their VA work as a VA who needs to, that's their job basically, as being a VA. They might have several clients, but they can't be as invested if they've got it. They might be invested in the future, but they just don't have the time, and they can't have that flexibility.
Yeah, and last question, we've literally got a minute to go. Question about how much do you pay your team versus, is it a percentage, or is it specific to the tasks being carried out? I'm going to go with it depends again, really. It depends on the associate, it depends on the client rate, it depends how long they've been on the team. There is, I mean, I know what my start rate is, and I know what my next, but you know, if associates are very experienced and they come to me and they go, yeah, my associate rate is 30 quid. I'll be like, okay, is it worth 30 quid? Is it not worth 30 quid? Some are, some aren't for me. And it depends on the end client. It depends what their rate is, because some of my longer term clients have obviously been on get quite a good discounted rate for volume, which means that there isn't much margin there. So I definitely don't have a specific percentage. No, I would look on it case by case basis.
And if someone is a rate, we definitely, I've often had it with some higher rates, they are not the right fit for our business and been fairly disappointing.
Yeah,
so
actually same
on that.
Yeah.
And I think something I like to make clear as you know, around our rates in this industry is there's a lot of large agencies not run in the same way and are paying super low rates. So we are all doing really well here on trying to lift the standards of the industry. So, you know, if yours aren't the highest, that's okay. Just know that your benchmark, where your benchmark is, I think. Yeah. And especially, I think I worked out from a large agency, if you Google them, that we're paying 100% more to the VAs than they are. So I think that's something we should all be really proud of, that we're trying to lift this, and it's okay if you're not paying, you know, the top end of associate rates.
Yeah.
Goals.
Right, we are at time, ladies. So thank you ever so much for your help. It's been fab. I hope people have found it useful and helpful. Do come, and if you're not on Viva already, come and find out a little bit more in there. We may do some more websites, might do some more webinars. If you have associates or you come across people who want to be associates, do when we issue the original one we were planning to do, please share that with them, because if it helps us all, if associates are doing the right things to get the jobs, applying for the right jobs, and know how it all works, right? So it helps all of us in the future when we're looking for associates, if the associates themselves understand the process. So yeah, I'm going to wrap up there. Thank you ever so much, everybody, for joining in, and yeah, thanks for coming.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks, Kathy.
See you later.
Thanks. Bye.
Thought we'd phrase them then.
Hey, well done. We survived.
Awesome. Do you want to stop recording?
Oh yeah.
I thought we'd all frozen then, and I was like, what's going on?